Hello everybody and welcome to day 3 of 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. Today we're going to look at back rank combinations. So back rank combinations are very simple in theory. It's basically normally a checkmate or a threat of a checkmate when the opponent's king has either not provided enough space for his own king to prevent checkmate, or has pieces and pawns that do not provide adequate space to prevent checkmate. So in this position, we could see here that black has some very sinister threats, but it is white to move. Black has this discovery along here, and he has 2 rooks on the 7th rank, or the 2nd rank for white. Basically, if white doesn't do something to prevent these attacks, then he's going to be checkmated very quickly. So if we look at our candidate moves, going from the king, we could see that, well, the king could move over, but then black would just simply take the bishop, so that doesn't work. Let me go back here. If we look at the rooks, we could see that we have a check here, and it looks like that does work. That does result in a checkmate, but we should still look at all the other candidates. We can take here, but that doesn't really solve anything, although it does prevent checkmate. So, and also we can take the bishop here. So normally if you find a checkmate, in a real game, you'll just go for the checkmate and that'll be it. But for the purposes of our practice, you do want to go through the process of finding all the possibilities, because that's the first step of improving your tactical skill, is simply noticing on the board every single possibility, and eventually it will become just automatic, subconscious. You'll just look and you'll see what can happen. But for our purposes, you do want to find all the possibilities. But in this specific position, white simply has the check here. And so the line would run, now even though he's giving up a rook, an exchange, it does result in checkmate because of this bishop along this diagonal. Now black can interpose, but the checkmate results when rook takes f8, and because of these pawns, it's checkmate, game over. Now, for example, if the pawn was here, then even if he took, black could simply escape, but that's not the position we have. So it's important to notice these features when you're solving tactics, so that when you're playing a game, you can kind of understand which moves could prevent a certain tactic. All right, so we're going to move on to the 5 positions to give you some practice for back rank combinations. All right, in position 1, it is white to move, and basically you want to practice going through all the possible candidate moves and all the threats from black as well. So I'll give you a second here, just pause the video and try to solve it yourself. Okay, so in this position, you could see that, well, black is going for an attack on white's king, but he's surrounded by all his pieces, the 2 rooks and the queen. So there's really no threats that black has immediately. What we want to look for is we want to look for all the checks, captures, and threats. So now, even though this is simple, you could see that white is threatening this rook, but you want to look at the whole board and you want to find all the possibilities. Now, these kind of moves are sometimes hard to find, especially on quick notice, but you still want to look for everything. Now, it looks like the bishop could take here as a check, but that doesn't really lead to anything. The knight could simply take. And of course, we're just going to take the hanging rook here. But you also need to look at the rook moving down, because that could lead to checkmate. But you want to be able to count that the rook could take, the knight could take, and then it looks like the rook could take anyway. But so, for example, if we moved here, we can see it doesn't really work because our counting was off. So you should be able to discount that line. But of course, once we simply take here, then the queen comes back, we take it, And now we could take either with the rook or the queen here. And that's another back rank checkmate from the previous one we saw because of these 3 pawns. Alright, moving on to position 2. Alright, welcome to position 2, and it is black to move, so I'll give you a second here to try to go through your thought process and figure it out. Okay, so in position 2, we can see that it's pretty much a do or die situation, as white is threatening checkmate in multiple ways. For example, queen to e7 is checkmate, or rook to a8. So there's really no way that black can have a straight defense. But of course, the best defense is an offense. And so in this position, black actually has one resource, which is a sacrifice. So when finding candidate moves, you have to understand if it's a do or die situation. You have to understand completely the opponent's threats before you can move on. And I do cover that in my strategy course in my 4-part thought process. That's actually the first step when you're playing a game, is to find the opponent's threats. So we know that the opponent's threatening checkmate. We need to find something that's forcing either a check, a capture, or a threat. And so in this case, black has a sacrifice of the queen, which is a capture and a check, very forcing. And after white takes, then we bring the rook in, and because this rook is cutting off the flight square of the white king, it's checkmate. And as you can see, again, from the previous 3 positions, or previous 2 positions we looked at, it's the same situation. White has hemmed in his king by his pawns. And this is why you see a lot of players moving a pawn or 2 from the opening to the middle game to prevent these kind of back rank combinations. Alright, we'll move on to position 3. In position 3, it is black to move, and I'll pause it a second here so you can solve the position yourself. Okay, so in this position, you can see that, well, first if you quickly look over the board, you can see that black is down a huge amount of material. Basically, he's down a queen and a minor piece. So it's another dire situation where he has to use back rank combination to checkmate the opponent, or either win a huge amount of material. So since it's black to move, you want to look at all the checks, captures, and threats, where you can see that the rook can be taken here, but that doesn't lead to anything because white will just simply recapture. The bishop can take and check here, so we want to investigate that more, and that's what we'll do here. So if bishop takes, then there's only 2 moves, so it's a forcing combination. The rook can interpose, but then we'll just recapture, and the king has to move over. So those are the only 2 moves. I just want to make a point here that, so the reason you want to look at checks, captures, and threats is because, and even in a strategic position, you want to look at all the checks, captures, and threats, because it forces the opponent to do something concrete, to do something that you can actually easily look ahead. And when you force the opponent to do something concrete, you can figure out exactly what you need to do. So you could see that white only has 2 moves, and both of them lead to the same situation. So after this, after the white king is forced back, then we can look at the other moves, which we have a check here, and if we bring the rook in after white's rook takes, then we take back, and it's a back rank mate. Again, these pawns have hemmed in white's king, and that's resulted in a checkmate here, even though white is up a queen. Alright, so I hope that helped in this position. We're going to move on to position 4. Alright, so in position 4 here, it is white to move, and I just want you to keep in mind that you need to use accurate counting, which Dan Heisman, a famous chess teacher, he likes to remind students to work on their counting skills, which is basically checking a certain square and seeing how many of your pieces cover it versus another, or versus your opponent, for example. All right, so it's white to move, and I'll give you a second here. All right, so in this position, you can see that the black rook is threatening the white queen. Now, if white didn't control this f8 square more than black, then he would have to simply move his queen or to make a greater threat. But because we can count that white hits the f8 square once, twice, 3 times, because of this bishop, that white, if he captures on f8, will actually have a checkmate, again because these two pawns are hemming in the black king. And so we don't really need to look at too many other candidate moves because there's simply a capture, a forcing sequence that results in checkmate. So when you have a counting tactic, it's best to simply count the pieces on that square, or to visualize in your head the end combination. And that's another important point to make, is that when you see a checkmate, it's very important to take a second just to evaluate. So what you want to do is you want to look at this initial position, try to calculate by simply visualizing the movement of the queen. So that the queen moving down each square and actually capturing it. So you want to visualize this position and then this position, and you want to visualize the movement of each piece. So the rook actually moving down the file until you have this final end position. So that's another calculation technique that I use to ensure the accuracy of my counting. All right, in position 5 here, the last position, I'll just give you a second here. It's black to move, and you want to find the back rank combination that wins. Okay, so if this position looks familiar, it's because it was position, I think, 3, and it was a move before, and I'm doing this because I want to make a few points. So this position involves counting, where you have to count this square, the number of captures, as well as counting if we can checkmate on f1, as well as a sacrifice of the queen and a forcing continuation. So when you solve tactical positions, you'll often find that over time, your pattern recognition will kind of be triggered by different positions. Now, even if it's a different position, you'll recognize that kernel in that position of when you can apply that tactic. And that's a very important point to make with tactical puzzles, is you don't just want to solve tactical puzzles and kind of do it haphazardly, but you want to find a process that you can use, as well as a framework of how you can apply that information, so that when you have a similar position, that you'll recognize in that position how you can apply what you've previously learned how to do. So in this position, we could see that, well, white is attacking on the 7th rank, but we can effectively ignore it because we're going to be attacking because white is hemmed in by his 2 pawns here, or the white king is. So we could check here and we can check here. So we want to investigate these checks. Now, the white bishop is threatening the queen, and it's protected by the knight here, so we can't just simply take it, as that will just involve us losing our queen for 2 minor pieces. So we have the check here, and even though the bishop can take, when we recapture, it forces white to either move his king back, or if he brings his rook in, he'll have to move his king back anyway, and we'll get checkmate. So because of the back rank weakness that we recognized, it allows us to be able to even sacrifice our queen to force white back and to allow us to deliver a checkmate. So at this point, you had to accurately assess whether you covered f1 by your counting technique, and we do, so it results in a back rank checkmate. All right, so that's it for day 3. I just covered some quite basic positions for back rank combinations, but the basics is what you need to know before you move on to more complicated things. And actually, even if you become a strong player, you still need to just keep coming back to the basics, because that's what makes you stronger, ironically. So I gave some tips on counting and visualizing positions. I'll go more in depth in that as we go later, but for now I'm just going to be covering more basic tactical motifs. Leave a comment, let me know what you think about this series, and if there's any tips or tricks that you have on how to improve your tactics, let me know too. Alright, thanks for watching. Have a good day.